Hey, Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about how to use QuickBooks Online in 2022. Pretty much the same way you would have used it in 2021. Kidding, of course, sort of. A lot of things are the same, but as you may have noticed if you've used QuickBooks Online for a minute, excuse me, Intuit rolls out lots of updates throughout the year. Now, let's talk about this in the bigger picture. Last year at the end of the year, I had a client reach out to me. He wanted to do all this extra work, and he owed me some money. And so I was able to quickly look up his account in QuickBooks Online, and so I could tell him, hey, look, I'd love to do this extra work for you, but I really need you to get me caught up before I can do it. And sure enough, he paid me promptly, and this way I was able to move on. You see, accounting and an accounting system is about putting the right information into that system so that you could get the right information out of that system and make informed decisions about what to do with your business. And that was an example of a common one that will come up, right? So we want to be able to we want to have a piece of software that enables us to use the information we have and pull it up quickly at our fingertips. So we're going to look at a bunch of different areas in QuickBooks Online just so I can walk you through how to use it. And we're also going to take a look at this mobile app, which personally I think not enough people pay attention to. QuickBooks Online actually has a really good mobile app that can do some really cool stuff. So let's take a look at my screen and we'll dive right in to all the things that I want to review with you. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, especially for those of you who may be brand new to QuickBooks Online, is the pricing. Pricing is updated pretty much yearly by Intuit. They actually skipped a year, and I think that worked against them because then when they, raised their rates, a lot of people were up in arms like, oh, you raised their rates. Yes, they raised their rates, like everybody should raise their rates in their business every single year. So, pricing. I'm going to provide you with a link and bookmarks to all the different parts of this video so you can quickly look up what part of the video covers which topic. The first one obviously will be pricing, and when you go to this page, you'll scroll down and you'll see the pricing. Now, this might change. It's very possible by the time you watch this video and then click the link that the prices have changed. I don't know how long it's been since I made this video until the time you're watching this, right? So don't yell at me if the prices have changed. I have zero control over that. This is just what the prices are as of the day I'm recording this in January of 2000. So somebody's going to look at this and say, well, this is great, Seth, but which one should I use? And here's my favorite answer to this question, and I answer it this way, whether it's about QuickBooks Online or any other app on the planet, which is use the simplest one that you think will address your needs. You can always upgrade if you run into any kind of friction, if you run into the need for a feature that you don't have. I promise you, it's 2 clicks and you can upgrade to a more robust version. Generally speaking, I start my own clients off right here at Plus. Right? I find that in most cases, these 2 versions, for the type of clients that I serve, these 2 versions don't offer enough of the features that we need, but you can see them clearly lined up right here. They've laid this out beautifully. You can see exactly where one breaks off and the other one picks up and kind of gives you what all the additional things are, right? 3 users to 5 users to 25 users. So this may be the main driver right off the bat is if you need more than 3 users, boom, you're already in Plus. Right? And if you need a lot more than that, if you need up to 25 users, then you're definitely in QuickBooks Online Advanced. There's other things, but this is just to give you a guide for how to analyze this and come to your own decision about which version you should use. When in doubt, use the lowest one you think you absolutely need at a minimum, and like I said, you can always upgrade afterwards, okay? Now, the next question a lot of people asked that I didn't address in last year's sort of version of this video. How to migrate from QuickBooks Desktop. So in the write-up, which is going to be linked in the description if you're watching this on YouTube, you will need a free login on my website to access that write-up. You don't have to subscribe. You can just skip that part. But you do need a login to my account because it's laid out like a course, right? So you need a login to my website. In that write-up, you'll find the links to where you can access the steps that are right on the help side. It's actually very easy to migrate from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, but there are some things you should do as a double check in QuickBooks Desktop. You should run your balance sheet, make sure your accounts are reconciled to the most current month possible, right? Run your balance sheet, run your P&L, just clean up the books and make sure everything looks good before you do it. Then it's pretty much 2 clicks in Desktop. Unless you're an enterprise, then it's a couple of extra things you need to, it's not built into the navigation in enterprise. advertised, at least not the last time I looked. You need to know these keyboard shortcuts to bring up the dialog that will let you migrate that to QuickBooks Online. But bottom line is, you do the process, clean up the books, you click the buttons to migrate, and once you've migrated, then you'll want to run your balance sheet and P&L in QuickBooks Online and make sure they agree to what you had in desktop before you migrated. The other thing to note is your bank recs, you don't lose them, but you will have to re-reconcile to the last month that you had reconciled to in desktop. Everything's going to be checked off already. So literally all you'll have to do is go to reconcile it, putting the ending balance from the last statement that you had reconciled. If it was balanced in desktop, it'll come in balanced at this point in QuickBooks Online immediately to 0, and you click reconcile. So you do lose all the reconciliation histories of the individual reconciliations that you had in desktop up to the point up to the last month that you were reconciled to before you did the migration. So this is important to know. Okay, now let's talk about the mobile app. I want to show you this because I feel like nobody really talks about this, at least not in the accounting world. So first I'm going to enable the security setting in the mobile app that allows me to share my screen, and then we're going to cut over to this and I'm going to show you what's going on in the mobile app. So once I've logged into a company in my mobile app, it will take me to this today screen, right? And I like to use a stylus with my mobile. So as you can see, it's got 17 transactions to review. This is from the bank feed. So I can literally update the transactions from my bank feeds right here in the mobile app. Just tap in and it loads them up. There's 2 different accounts. Okay, obviously this is a dummy company, so these aren't real, but you get the picture. It's very easy to go in here, and by the way, if I needed to code one of these, I could tap into here just like I would see if I was in my desktop in my browser. QuickBooks sort of tries to guess what it might be, but I can certainly change things as I need to. Right here, it's looking to transfer it. I can tap over here to tell it, no, I want to actually categorize this transaction, and so on and so forth. Or I can match it if I think there's an existing transaction that it should be a match to. So I love the fact that I can do this. If I'm sitting waiting for a haircut or something, I can just spend that time. When I was a kid, my mother used to always tell me, use the time to your advantage. That's exactly how I can do that, right? If I'm waiting for a haircut or I'm waiting at a doctor's office or something, or if I'm just sitting in my car waiting for something, instead of reading my dumb Facebook feeds, I can do something productive like update my bank feeds in QuickBooks Online. Okay, as you can see, as I'm scrolling through the screen, you can pay bills, you can do a lot of stuff. One of my favorite things to tell my clients about is how I can take a snapshot of a receipt, right? Let's see if I have a quick one handy here. I don't, but you get the idea. I can take a snapshot of a receipt, and then I can add it right in as an expense if it's something I've just paid for. And that receipt will be attached the next time I log into QuickBooks Desktop. So really cool way for me to get, as an accountant, for me to get my clients to attach the documentation that I need, and then I don't have to bug them about how to code something or how to categorize it in case they're not sure, right? So that's a dashboard. I can go to activity, see recent activity. If I go to my business, it will give me kind of an overview here. Okay, and then back to the menu, and I can access all the major areas that I would want to be able to access pretty regularly. In terms of looking at transactions, customers, everything you can see here on my screen. These are shortcuts to the common ones. If I go to all, then it gives me a list of everything I can access from within the mobile app. And as you can see, I've got some of the common reports. I can run a profit and loss and a balance sheet. If I want to get into detailed reporting, then of course I'm going to want to do that, in the main desktop or browser app. So that's a couple minutes worth on the mobile app. I really think it's worth taking a look at. Okay, and then we are back to the desktop. Now, anytime I start off a new client in QuickBooks Online, then I'm going to go through the gear icon. Let me refresh my page here. Why do I do this? Obviously, as somebody who's been using and teaching QuickBooks Online for a lot of years, I don't necessarily need this to know what's in here. Although I'll tell you, there are still some times where I forget exactly where something is. Why? Because there are some things I don't use with every single client. And all of a sudden a client comes along where I'm like, I need that, but then I remember I need to turn that setting on. So I use this with new clients as a sort of checklist so that in case there's something I forgot to ask the client about, going through every single part of every single setting with every single new client that I take on will help sometimes remind me of things that if I didn't, I should have asked the client about. If you're the business owner yourself going through this, it'll remind you of things you may need. It might just give rise to ideas like, oh, hey, I didn't even know I could do that, but here's a setting for it. Let me go find out more. Let me call that guy Seth or see if he's got a video on this on YouTube, right? So go through every single part of the settings area. Usage is something you'll see that refers to which version of QuickBooks Online you're in. The only one that's not limited is QuickBooks Online Advanced, right? So I think this particular company file is in Plus. You can tell actually by the number of users. I have 1 user out of 5 that I'm allowed. Chart of accounts, I'm limited to 250, right? Classes, I can have up to 40. And tag groups, I can have up to 40 tag groups. This is in QuickBooks Online Plus. Of course, over here, they're letting me know if I need more, then I can upgrade right here over to QuickBooks Online Advanced, and that's great. Sales, you'll see a lot of settings right off the bat. You can see where you can customize your sales forms, like your invoices. A lot of stuff in here that I always want to make sure I've turned on by default. Custom transaction numbers, that's up to you. Do you need to put your own invoice numbers in, or do you want to forget about it and let QuickBooks assign the number? Oftentimes, I want this off, in fact. I don't want to deal with having to worry about what the invoice number is and so forth, right? So you're going to go through this section by section and make sure that you've turned on. Look at this in products and services. I have everything turned on, right? I wanted the price rules on. I want to track quantity and price or rate. I wanted to track inventory quantity on hand, right? So these are things you want to go through so you can make that decision. Is this something that I need? Do I need to charge late fees? I have this off. Progress invoicing, right? I can control messages for different types of forms that go out when I send an email from QuickBooks Online for that, for an invoice or an estimate or what have you, right? I can change the language over here. Scrolling down, reminders, I can do automatic reminders, online delivery, right? And then I have some settings here for statements. Expenses, when I get to expenses, I want to make sure that, in most cases, I want to make sure that I've turned this on, track expenses and items by customer. This is simple job costing. So if I want to be able to take an expense and say this expense is associated with this customer or this job, then this needs to be turned on, and it's not necessarily on by default, right? Showing tags, right? Showing items table on expenses and purchase forms. These are all really important. You may have no clue what I'm talking about. If you don't have a clue about what this stuff means, you can leave it off, but just go through the settings, get familiar with what's available, and then you can go ask questions. You can go reach out to somebody like me and say, hey, Seth, what are tags all about? And I have a video on tags that I can send you the link to, right? Or post your comments below on this video if you're watching this on YouTube. Do I want to use purchase orders and so on? QuickBooks Payments refers to the QuickBooks Online, the QuickBooks Payments service where you can use QuickBooks to process payments on invoices that you send out. I strongly encourage you to use this. It makes it really easy to get paid by people. You send an email with an invoice. It got links where they can choose how they want to pay you. You can even decide if you don't want them to pay you by credit card, so you don't have to pay the credit card fees. You can force it so that it's ACH only, and then the ACH fee is very cheap. It's like 50 cents or $1 per transaction, something like that. Okay, and then time is, of course, for time tracking, settings, and then advanced. You definitely want to go through. There's a lot of advanced things that are going to be important. What's your first month of the fiscal year? If you haven't elected otherwise, it's going to be January. And if you're not sure, check with your CPA or whoever files your tax return, your enrolled agent, and they can confirm with you what the first month of your fiscal year is. First month of income tax year could be different. Generally, it's not. And then the accounting method. Now, some of you, or your accountants are going to tell you to do cash basis. I'm going to tell you, no, do accrual. Okay? Cash basis is only good for filing taxes. It's not good for analyzing a business. You cannot analyze a business on a cash basis. It makes me crazy when I find that an accountant has told one of my clients to set their books up on a cash basis. It's wrong, right? This is one of those few areas where I'm going to go straight out and say it's the wrong way. You cannot analyze or run a business properly on a cash basis. You need to do it on accrual. You can run cash basis reports for their purposes when it's time to file the returns. Okay. If you know what kind of company you have, whether it's an S Corp or partnership and so on, then you'll know the answer to this question. If not, again, ask the person who is filing your returns. Enable account numbers. Do you want account numbers in your chart of accounts? I personally hate them, but a lot of accountants still love them. To me, it's a very old school way of doing things, but that's just me. I'm kind of a nerd. Automation, pre-filling forms. All of this is pretty straightforward, and I've kind of brought your attention to the things that I feel are really important in terms of that. Banking and bank fees. This is the cornerstone of your accounting system, right? I wouldn't say it was always the case, but especially when bookkeeping went to the cloud, this became the cornerstone. Everything's going to run through your banking and bank feeds, and this is why in my Bulletproof Bookkeeping course, I start you off with the bank feeds, and I have multiple detailed lessons on how to set up bank feed rules and other ways of getting transactions into your accounts in case you have trouble connecting your bank or anything like that's going on. So I really think this is such an important thing to to understand how it works. So if we go into here, over here I've got an example of property management account with some transactions downloaded. This is what it'll look like when you actually connect this to a bank and download the transactions. And you're going to want to learn how to get in here and how to understand based on the different kinds of transactions you have. Right, here's bank detail, owner draw. So this is going to be distributions. That's the vendor, sorry. Distributions, the vendor, the payee would be the owner, me per se, right? And you're going to go in here and you're going to code the different transactions. The other thing that's important is you're going to want to learn how to use the rules. Like I said, my Bulletproof Bookkeeping course goes over this in extensive detail. You can see here how I've got a bunch of rules set up here. So if somebody spent money at a gas station at 76, Union 76, it's going to come in here and it's going to automatically assign the payee. Right, 76, it's going to put the transaction, set the transaction up as an expense transaction type. It's going to categorize it as automobile expense right here, right? So learn to use the bank feeds and learn to use the rules. Setting up the rules is how you get to substantially automate the bookkeeping process, right? The more you do this, the more you feed QuickBooks Online with the information for how to record things for you, the more automated it becomes, the less you have to do the basic bookkeeping stuff. When you do set up these rules, you'll get an option to automatically confirm transactions that this rule applies to. I personally never turn that on. I always want to at least glance at it first and make sure that this isn't some one-off where it needs to go somewhere else, or that there just isn't some kind of mistake where the rule just got applied wrong somehow, right? So I always want the chance to at least review it. But what I found is, especially with newer clients, if I spend the first 1 to 3 months, and it depends on the complexity of the client, but if I spend a lot of time in the beginning creating a rule for everything, then I spend less time in the long haul. So a lot of times once I get that going, and most people are creatures of habit, they spend money at the same places time in and time again, so that over time what happens is I reach a point where I spend oftentimes no more than 5 minutes a week maybe updating bank feeds, and all I have to do is deal with the 2 or 3 outliers that the rules didn't cover because it was something new. And I just create rules for those things and I'm off and running. So by spending the time up front creating these systems, I end up saving myself so much time in the long run, right? Bank reconciliations. If I'm in the bank feeds area here and I click go to bank register, then I can go right in here and reconcile. And this process is as old as the concept of bookkeeping, right? We're going to go in here and we're going to enter in the ending balance for the statement, the ending date on that statement, and then QuickBooks is going to show us what it sees. We're going to look at the statement, and if I see that the statement shows that this same 856.48 cleared as a deposit, I'm going to check it off, right? And as I check these things off, the difference may get further away, then it'll get closer to 0. At the end of the day, the difference needs to be 0 by the time I'm done reconciling. I'll save this for later. So there's your 2 cents or 10 cents worth on bank recs. Another thing that's going to be important to know how to get into right away, especially if you're just getting started with QuickBooks Online, is if I go into my sales area and I go to products and services, right? So products and services, think of this as your virtual shelf, right? This is where in your accounting system, the different products or services that you sell, these are the shelves that these are the things that sit on those shelves, right? So this is a generic one that comes sort of standard with any QBO company. This is a bundle, which is something we can get into in a more advanced sort of lesson or lecture. Right here is where you saw earlier the example of like a property management company. So I have an item designed for picking up rent, right? And it goes to the income account, rental income. I can categorize the different products and services if I want to, and I can also assign them a class. I can set standard prices or rates, or in this case, I leave it blank because different tenants are going to pay different amounts of rent, right? So this is where you set up all the different things that you charge for, especially if you're invoicing people for things, right? That's what your products and services list is really all about. You're going to want to set that up. You're going to want to know how to set that up so that you can start invoicing clients and start getting paid as quickly as possible. Right? So with that, we can get into some basic transactions. I want to go through your invoices and sales receipts to cover the revenue cycle, and then we'll go through some expenses and checks and bills to cover the expense cycle, right? And then we'll talk for another minute about banking and bank fees, and then we'll get into some reports here, okay? So under customers, if I click new, under customers, I have all the different kinds of transactions that I might need to create in association with the customer. So we're going to focus first on invoices and sales receipts. Okay. The main difference between the invoice and the sales receipt is the invoice says I'm getting paid later. The sales receipt says I'm getting paid right now, right? So this is what you would use if you're doing the accounting for, let's say, a retail type business where people come in and they pay, or e-commerce where people go on your website and they pay right away. They're not paying in 30 days from now, they're paying right away. So that's going to be a sales receipt. Otherwise, you do an invoice. And the form itself, I'll duplicate my tab here. The form itself is almost identical, with a few important distinctions, which make sense given what I just explained to you about the difference between the two. So in both cases, you can see you're going to fill out a customer, you're going to put in their email in case you're emailing this to them, which of course is what I always do. Right down here, you're going to list those products or services I just mentioned, right? What are we charging them for? Same thing in a sales receipt, okay? We have the products and services and so on. Here's the main difference. With an invoice, I'm getting paid later. So as soon as I fill all this out and figure out how much I need to get paid, then I can, again, if their email is in here, I can send it later, or I can save and send it to them right now. And that's it, because then I'm just waiting until they pay me, and then there's going to be something else to do. On the sales receipt, like I said, the assumption is I'm getting paid right now, which means we need the payment information right here on the sales receipt. That's what you're going to see that's not included on the invoice. So the payment method, and I don't really care that much about this, but it can be useful sometimes to know if they paid by check or by credit card. Most important thing is the deposit too, right? If I'm getting paid for this sale, and I know that money is, let's say, being paid electronically and it's going right into my bank account, then I can choose this as the deposit too. But if for any reason I know that, let's say I got paid by check here, and I might get 4 other checks today that are all going to need to get grouped in the same deposit, that's when we're going to choose undeposited funds here. So we record all those sales in undeposited funds, and then after that, we can go to record a deposit, okay, which is going to be under other. And if I have anything in undeposited funds, I will see that indicated here. Right now, there's no payments to show, so you don't see anything. So it's something that only shows up when there's actually something sitting in undeposited funds. And then I'll be able to check off those deposits. And then down here in this section, if I'm adding anything else to that deposit, I have the opportunity to do so. Okay, so that's essentially how that works with sales receipts and invoices. All the other transactions that you'll find under customers are pretty straightforward. If I've already invoiced somebody, when they pay, I'm going to do receive payment. The form is straightforward. If I need to create and send an estimate to a customer, that's right here. If a customer is unhappy with something and I want to give them a credit towards a future purchase, then I can do a credit memo. The sales receipt we covered. If I'm actually just going to refund, instead of giving them a credit, then I do a refund receipt. And delayed credits and charges are pretty much as straightforward as the names might suggest. This is a credit or a charge I might want to issue to a customer that I'm going to issue at some later date, hence the term delayed, right? So that's pretty much your rundown on the customers, right? Next, I promised you that we would take a look at some more basic transactions. We've just looked at everything that's on the customer side, which of course deals with revenue, sales, the money we take in exchange for the services that we offer. So now let's take a look at what happens on the other side of that. Everything having to do with vendors, expenses, checks, bills. Of course, if we enter a bill, we got to pay the bill. If we need to place an order in advance of receiving something, then we use a purchase order. If we get a credit back from a vendor because we weren't happy about something or we sent something back, we have a vendor credit. Credit card credit would be when the credit card company is issuing us a credit for something. And if you happen to be actually printing checks out of QuickBooks Online, your option to do that is also found here under vendors. So very quickly, let's just go over the difference between an expense and a check. If you're in doubt, just use the expense transaction, because this can be used for anything. It can be used for what effectively would have been a check. The difference is instead of saying check number, it says reference number, right? The other major difference between an expense and a check is an expense will allow you to create expenses out of either bank accounts or credit cards. In fact, if you're entering a credit card charge, it has to be an expense, because that's one of the distinctions. A check specifically refers to money going out of a bank account. And so you won't find your credit card accounts appear in this drop-down when you're creating a check. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's duplicate the tab. Okay, and while we're here, let's just go over to the expenses section. Okay, new check. Okay, so they both give you the space to enter a payee. A check, like I said, only gives you access to bank accounts as far as the source. This is the source of the transaction. How is it being paid for, right? So that's one of the major distinctions. So typically, people will use a check for, well, obviously for an actual check that you wrote or printed, right? And sometimes what I'll do if I use a debit card is I'll use a check because it's still money coming out of the bank account, and I might even put something like, debit in the check number space. I personally don't actually do that, but that's what I do for clients who use debit cards. The truth is, most debit card transactions you're going to capture in the bank feeds, which we talked about earlier, and you're just going to add them in, and they're probably going to come in as just an expense. But either way, like I said, when in doubt, use the expense, because that'll cover anything. And so if you accidentally choose a bank account, you can easily switch it to a credit card. Here you're stuck with only bank accounts available as the source of the transaction. Everything else on these forms is pretty much exactly the same. Like I said, a check, you have a check number. An expense, you have a reference number, right? And down over here, you can put whatever category it's for, like if it's rent, right? Or whatever you're actually paying for here in the amount. And if you're tracking inventory and paying for inventory and recording it this way, you use the item details section down here. This will not be visible by default, by the way. That's back in the settings. You have to turn that on, that you want the item details included in expense transactions, right? You actually saw that earlier in the video. You might not have noticed it because you might not have been looking for it, okay? So I'm going to leave without saving. Okay, but that is essentially how you use expenses and or checks, right? It's just anytime you created something and you want to make sure you get it recorded, you can do it. The truth is, like I said, most of this kind of stuff, you can just wait for the bank feeds to come through, but sometimes you went and you paid for something and you have the receipt, and if you're going to use the mobile app like I showed you earlier, this is what you'll end up doing is from the mobile app, you'll take the snapshot of the receipt and you'll create an expense and you'll choose whatever account it was. If it was your debit card, you'll choose the bank account. If it's a credit card, you'll choose whichever credit card it is that you just used, right? And then you'll have the image attached, and then that will match up automatically with the bank feeds, right? I showed you that earlier. That's where you'd have an existing transaction, comes down in the bank feeds, and everything will just match up perfectly. Okay, the other thing is a bill. A bill is what you do, as the name suggests, when I receive a bill from somebody that I'm going to pay later on, right? So here I'd put in the vendor, the bill date, when it's due. Everything else is the same. I'm going to choose what category it was, right? And a lot of times for something like rent, I go over this extensively in my Bulletproof bookkeeping course. In order to make sure the rent shows up, in the right period on the first of the month, we'll often use a bill for the rent, because then what happens is we usually pay it maybe a few days before to make sure it's not late. So if we simply record an expense when it's paid, then this rent expense will show up in the wrong month. It'll show up last month instead of this month. So instead we create a bill, date it for the first, you record the payment as a payment on this bill. And that way the bill is whose date will drive when the expense shows up on your profit and loss statement. So So a little extra bonus tips there for you. Obviously, once you've entered a bill, then you go here to pay it, and you'll choose, look at all these rent bills that I haven't paid yet, right? Here you'll choose which account I'm paying it out of, and you'll choose, well, the assumption here is that we're paying by check, print later, unless I choose a credit card as my payment source. So if I'm going to pay these out with Capital One, notice what information went away, right? All the sort of check number related information disappears when I choose a credit card. So it's just kind of smart like that, right? So a credit card, whatever I choose, if I choose all three, if I choose 3 of these bills at once, and I record those as a credit card payment, it's going to assume that I'm paying one time $7,500 to cover that whole balance. So be aware of that. If you're trying to record individual credit card charges, then you have to select one at a time if they were entered as bills that you're now paying. One at a time, you'll pay it, right? And then you'll do the next one. Where it says schedule payments online here is also something new-ish. It's because Intuit integrated Melio as a service for paying your bills directly from within QuickBooks. So that's certainly something you can do. But look into the service. There are some things you're definitely going to want to understand about how that works before you just jump in and do it. So that is how you handle basic transactions. I showed you invoices and sales receipts. I've now shown you how expenses and checks work. And I've also just shown you entering bills and then, of course, where you go when it's time to pay those bills that you've entered. All right, now let's take a quick look again at banking and bank feeds. There's a couple more things I want to mention and show you before we move on. As far as banking and bank feeds go, I already ran you through real quick what that whole area looks like. I just wanted at this point to stop and remind you to make sure that you've set up all of your bank and credit card accounts in the bank feeds, right? So I had these sample accounts here. All you can do is click here where it says link account. Search for your bank. If you bank with a major bank, then you should have no problem finding them. Most banks are in here. The only situation where you might find your bank is not here is if you work with a local credit union or something that's just not sort of linked up to QuickBooks Online. In which case, as I mentioned earlier, my Bulletproof Bookkeeping course shows you other ways of getting the transactions in. So that's another conversation for another day, or sign up for my course. There's my shameless self-plug. All right, and this is how most of your bookkeeping gets done, as I pointed out earlier, is just downloading and adding in all your transactions from your various bank account and credit card accounts, bank feeds, okay? Now let's talk about reports, okay? The whole reason we spend time and money putting all this information into an accounting system is so that we can get good information out of that accounting system. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, somebody calls me up and says, I need you to do all this work for me, and I'm hesitant because I seem to remember that client owes me money. I don't want to do all this work if they're behind on paying me. That's a perfect and very common example of where I want to be able to quickly look up and see, has this customer paid? Oh, they have paid. Great. Wonderful. And I just then reach out back to the customer and say, yeah, no problem. Let's get on a call and we'll figure out what you need done, right? So reporting is very important. It is how we get the information we need to make informed decisions about our business. So we always want to start with the balance sheet. Okay, a lot of bookkeepers ask me, if I have a checklist for them. They want to know, is there a checklist I can use for how to go through my clients' books? And I say, yeah, it's already built into your accounting system. It's called the balance sheet, right? This is your checklist. You're going to go through and make sure all your bank accounts are up to date. That's going back to the bank feeds, and you do that part first. And as you're doing the bank feeds part, you kind of look at your calendar. It's right there on every computer at the bottom of your screen. It tells you what date today is, right? And so you see, oh, it's the beginning of a new month. Let's go get the statements from last month and we can reconcile them, right? I gave you a quick look at reconciliation. These are the processes that you go through in bookkeeping to make sure that everything's been accounted for, right? That you haven't missed anything. They will also have a way of flushing out if you have something in there that's an error, if you have something in there that's extra, duplicated, or just the wrong amount. All that will be forced out by way of the reconciliation process. So it's how you catch and correct lots and lots of bookkeeping errors, okay? The next thing you'll want to look at going down the balance sheet is your accounts receivable reports. So I usually will have multiple tabs open. I'll keep the balance sheet open as my ongoing checklist, and then I can just go to reports and check my accounts receivable. If I start typing receivable in the search, you'll find a few good receivables reports. The aging summary is a really good starting point. And this will show me, oh my God, these guys are 91 and over. They're way behind. We need to reach out to these people, right? If you build a process into your system where you're looking at this every single week, and then you build another process where anybody who's 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days late gets an email. I also showed you in the settings how you can set up different emails for different forms. In QuickBooks Online Advanced, you can completely automate this process, by the way. But I can set up a system where I follow up with customers who are behind on paying me. It does wonders for your cash flow. I've set these kinds of systems up for clients, and they can't thank me enough for it. Pays for my fees several times over. All right. Accounts payable, we're going to have a similar process. If I type payable in the search, you're going to find a payable aging summary. This is how you make sure you're not behind on paying somebody for something, right? You definitely don't want to be behind paying these guys, right? Although I get paid everything online via subscription, so it's not usually going to be the case with me. Okay. After we go through the balance sheet, then we can look at everybody's favorite, right? Which is the profit and loss. Okay. Make sure you know what planet you're on in terms of the date range when you're running this. A lot of companies are set to default to this month to date, and you look at it and you panic and say, whoa, wait, I made much more money than that, right? So make sure you understand where you are as far as this goes. As you can see, I have the accountant's version of QuickBooks Online, so I have tools here where I can go change those defaults. You don't, I can actually give you a link if you're not in the accountant version. That will get you into that area where you can change your reporting defaults. But your profit and loss is something you're definitely going to want to go through on a weekly basis and then on a monthly basis, on a very frequent basis, to make sure you're making money, okay? There's more. I have a whole article that I'm going to link you to in the write-up for this video called 8 Reports Every Company Should Set Up in QuickBooks Online, and it's going to walk you through in detail how to set those reports up and how to analyze them, actually. So check that video out. It's also free, right? And it'll give you a lot of answers as to what kind of reports you should run and what you should be looking at and why, okay? Now, you've seen me access it, so now let's talk about the nav bar here, okay? This is something that does get changed around quite a bit. Notice as I go into some of these areas like sales, there's a lot of sort of subgroupings, okay? But if I just click on sales, it goes, those same subgroupings can be found here across the top, all right? And the sales overview is kind of nice, by the way. I know that myself and a lot of my clients, when we're looking at, when we're trying to analyze receivables, right? There's the report, which I showed you, but this is also kind of nice. Actually, I find myself going into all sales here, and then I'll click on this overdue option here, and it just filters the list down to show me exactly what's overdue. And then I can quickly go in here and start sending reminders to people saying, hey, we need you to pay us, right? So I love this little part of the sales area. You'll find that expenses has something similar, not as many tabs, right? You just have expenses and vendors, pretty much. But I use this stuff quite a bit. So get familiar with the nav bar, right? This is something that I honestly, I should know this, but I believe it's accountant specific, where it enables me to kind of review the books and see what accounts have been reconciled, what haven't, and so on and so forth. So you may not see this if you're in just a direct sort of client version of QuickBooks Online. The dashboard's great. It kind of gives you some high-level information. It's very similar to that home screen in QuickBooks Desktop, okay? Banking, you've seen me jump into. And again, with the subgroups, and over here, we have the different tabs across the top. App transactions, as you can see, is for if you're selling on Amazon, you can connect apps. So this is for, commonly used apps that are sort of used directly in association with the banking area. We saw the rules. If you start using tags, you'll find that information here. And here's where you'll find receipts. You can upload from the computer, you can upload from Google Drive, or you can forward from an email address. So you can create a custom email address that will go into your QuickBooks Online company. This is pretty cool. And like I said, from the mobile app especially, it's very easy to attach receipts to transactions that way. Cash flow, you have a cash flow overview and a cash flow planner. This is fairly new. I think it was introduced just during 2021. Projects is a very cool way if you are very project-centric in your business. You can set up projects. It works a bit like setting up a sub-customer, but this as opposed to sub-customers, give you specific kinds of reporting where you can really drill in, and it shows you in a glance, here's all the income on the project, here's all the expenses, and here's the profit so far. And over here you can drill in to access all the transactions. So projects are really cool. The only thing it doesn't show you is anything about that project that might be on the balance sheet. So this is where for like construction companies, where while something's under construction, it's not going to the P&L, it's going to the balance sheet. So this won't work that well for those kinds of businesses. But for most businesses, this works great. It's a really good way to be able to, at a glance, understand, where a project is at least financially. Payroll, again, we have the different areas for employees, contractors, and workers' comp. QuickBooks Online Payroll. You might have seen the commercial I was in last year for QuickBooks Online Payroll. It's a great product. You can go in here. Obviously, it's beautifully integrated in QuickBooks Online. One little tip. The mobile app for QuickBooks Online Payroll is really good. I had a client earlier, last year, who actually, he's the one who alerted my attention about it. He doesn't love the screen where you're entering payroll in the desktop version, but he loves the mobile app and how you can enter payroll there. He said it's much easier to navigate when you have a whole bunch of employees to update payroll for. So do check out the payroll app for QuickBooks Online Payroll. Time, of course, is where you saw when I covered it in the settings. This is, of course, where you'll get an overview, and also you can drill and dig into different entries for time tracking purposes. QuickBooks Time is what used to be known as T-Sheets, right? Intuit bought them, and now it's called QuickBooks Time, and so that's effectively what you're integrating with when you go into this area within QuickBooks Online. The reports I touched on. Taxes is important. If you do have payroll on, then you'll have certain payroll tax settings which you'll find in taxes. I don't have payroll turned on for this company. It's a sample company, and I really don't want to pay for payroll for a sample company. But this is where you would find payroll tax settings as well if you're actually using QuickBooks Online for payroll. And this is important. There's some important settings that you'll find in here that you'll want to pay attention to. Mileage is straightforward. It's where I can track mileage. You can see it works really nicely with the mobile app. And it's got the standard kind of mileage rate in here, and you can either record trips manually or you can do it through the mobile app, like I said. Accounting is specific to people like me, or I'm sorry, it's not. This is where you'll get access to your chart of accounts, as you can see, and there's also a submenu here to go straight to reconciling. The way you saw me access this earlier was up here in the gear icon where you go to reconcile. The other way, as I showed you earlier, is from within any account register, right? And you can toggle between accounts this way. You can click reconcile here, and it will take you straight to that. And then this is for people who are not me, who want an accountant. So if I'm your accounting user set up in your QuickBooks Online company, then you'll find my information here. If you don't have an accountant added, which by the way is here, we looked at it quickly in the settings. You go to Manage Users, okay? And you'll want to add an accounting firm if you're adding somebody like me to help you manage your books if you're the business owner, let's say. When you do that, then that person's information, if it's me, my information will show up here. If you don't have somebody like me added, then I believe this area will give you suggestions for accountants in your area who are listed on the QuickBooks Online Pro Advisor site, whom you can reach out to and connect with and get help you need. Or if you're watching this video, just reach out to me. I'm sure I can get you in touch with somebody, if not myself, who can help you with your accounting and bookkeeping. Okay, last thing I want to show you in this video, actually two more things I want to show you in this video. First, you're working with software that works in your browser. It's on the web. Use your bookmarks, right? So I've shown you a lot of the navigation and how to access things, right? But let's say that you looked at this when I showed it to you earlier and you said, hey, Seth, you know what? I really like that all sales concept here. I want to be able to access that frequently. Well, any screen that you go into in QuickBooks Online, since you're in your browser, it has a URL. So all you have to do is use your browser's own bookmarking system and grab the URL. But wait, there's more. Let's say this overdue invoice is, let's say I want to send this invoice to my customer. And let's say I use Slack to communicate with all my customers, which I do. I can actually take this URL. Notice it has a transaction ID in it. I can copy and paste this whole thing, put it in Slack, and I can tell my client, log into QuickBooks Online first. That's important. It's not going to work if you're not logged in. And then click this link, And it's going to take you straight in to, to this transaction. Don't believe me? Quick example. Let's say I just drop it in a Google document here, right? All right, and just to prove that there's no tricks up my sleeve, I'm going to close that tab. I'll just go to the overview. Okay. I click here. Boom. Redirects. And in a few seconds, I'm right in this transaction. This little tip right here is worth its weight in gold. I can't tell you how much time this saves when I'm trying to get answers from a client of mine about a particular transaction. And that goes both ways. As the business owner, you can send a link like this to somebody like me as your accountant and say, hey, can you help me with this transaction, right? It's a great way to clear up uncategorized expenses, all kinds of things, right? So bookmarks, use your bookmark system. You could even, I use Opera for my bookmarks, so this is my bookmark system. If I were inclined, I could create a new folder and call it QBO Bookmarks. And in here, I wouldn't necessarily put a specific transaction because that's only going to work for one company. But like I was saying earlier, if there are certain general areas that I like to access frequently, and I don't want to necessarily have to remember where to go in the navigation, like sales, I can just go to this page, click to create the bookmarks. All right, I'll put it into QBO Bookmarks. Boom. Close that. Next time I want to access it, and this will work in any company that I might access, just use that bookmark and it'll take me right into whatever client I'm logged into, their whole sales area. So use your bookmarks. I'm also going to link up a link in the write-up to another article that I did on Intuit's Firm of the Future website called Extreme Bookmarking. It goes over how to use your browser, but then it goes over a bunch of other apps where if you want to get really extreme with this, I will show you how you can do all kinds of things using your choice of several different apps for keeping track of all different kinds of bookmarks. Okay, so one last thing, and this is a lifesaver for me. I can't tell you how many times I will be working in a client's books and I will just have posted a transaction. And as is often my habit, as soon as I post something, I'm often running back to my balance sheet, right? Or my P&L, depending on where I expected that transaction to show up, and confirming that it showed up exactly where I wanted it to, where I needed it to, in the way that I wanted it to. And I can't tell you how many times I go to check and it's not there. It didn't post in the area where I had wanted it to. And at that point, it's like, how do I quickly get back to that last transaction I posted? This is a lifesaver here, this magnifying glass. When you click on it, it will show you recent searches, but then recent transactions, right? So it shows me that the last few transactions I was in, we're starting with the most recent was this estimate, right? Here's a bill to landlord. So anytime I post a transaction, it will update. So this is a way I've quickly found a transaction where I miscategorized something, which is usually why it doesn't show up where you expect it to. And that lets me quickly get into the transaction and make whatever correction I need to make. So that recent transactions feature is a lifesaver for me, and I'm pretty sure you'll thank me for this if you didn't know about it. And while I'm here, if you click this advanced search, I use this all the time with clients. They'll say, hey, Seth, did you get a transaction for me for $2,500, for such and such? And I can just search all transactions for that amount, and it will show me, in this case, that was the amount of the rent. So I can see all the rent bills, right? But this is another lifesaver, especially when a client's skeptical and they think I failed to pick up a transaction. I can use this to quickly pin it down as long as I have the exact amount of the transaction. So that's the deal. I record something, I don't know where it went. I say, what happened? I use the recent transaction search and bam, there it is. I can quickly find it. In a few cases, I've done that, and it turns out for some reason I didn't save the transaction. Something glitched in my browser. Who knows? As long as I can confirm that, I know I can safely add that transaction again without creating a duplicate. And then, of course, that generally comes as also a reminder to me to slow down a little bit. So that's about all, folks. That's how to use QuickBooks Online in 2022, pretty much the same way you used it in 2021. But now you have an update in terms of changes to the interface, where things are, and maybe some things you didn't catch or know about in 2021 that you can now start using in 2022. As always, I hope you had some fun here. I hope you learned something along the way. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you on the web.